Hey, what's up? On a scale of 1 to 10, what are you? So I saw this clip recently where they were asking people what they thought they were on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the absolute best, 1 being the absolute worst. And I thought I'd do a little breakdown of what it kind of means to actually be a 10. So for most people, I think when people say someone is a 10 or they give someone any number, it's mostly based on looks, but also the way they carry themselves, how they talk, their style, basically the whole package, but mostly focused on how you feel about them and the whole message you get from them. So there's two ways to go about this, objective and subjective. I think objectively, when you rate someone, you're thinking how many people would agree on the number that you rate them. So for example, if you and a billion other people would rate this person the same number, then they're probably that number. If 100 people in the world would rate this person a certain number, then it kind of loses some credibility. Of course, there are different beauty standards in different cultures, different countries. So it's tough to say for sure objectively, but I think across the board, a lot of people can recognize a common baseline of beauty. Maybe there's a few exceptions to that, but of course there's always going to be a bell curve. But actually, even with a bell curve, it's kind of like, where does the center lie? And so sometimes the center will lie higher, sometimes the center will lie lower. Subjectively though, you can have your own opinion, and that opinion doesn't have to match the masses. It doesn't have to match what the objective answer is. So if you think someone is a 10, that's perfectly acceptable as a subjective answer. And this is actually where it gets into an interesting territory, because if you were objectively a 6 or a 7, but you met another person who was objectively a 6 or a 7, but you viewed that person as a 10, they viewed you as a 10, they treated you like a 10, you treated them like a 10, then you're basically living the life of a 10 in some ways. You might not be invited to a billionaire's yacht, you might not be getting flown out to cities, but how you feel around this person is going to feel like a 10. And maybe a lot of the rest of the world doesn't treat you in that particular way, but when you're around this significant other and you're going to spend a lot of time with them, in that time you're going to feel like a 10, and that's a great feeling. You can also get a similar thing with friends. You know, you might be a little bit weird, maybe you're into something strange, but maybe your whole friend group is into something strange, and you've got these inside jokes, and you know, you can have a great camaraderie, a great friendship, and that's no different to someone than a friend group that's into more normal things. Like let's say a friend group is into sports, or going on the basis that sports is normal, then they're also going to have inside jokes, and it's all the same thing. It's just a topic. It's just a topic. And so I don't know if it's arbitrage, but if you just surround yourself with people that make you feel like 10s, then you can experience life almost like a 10. Maybe not all the time, but the times that you're around those people, for sure. Now, going back to the original question, what's it mean to be a 10? I think when most people ask this question, the answer they're looking for is the objective answer. So if ever you do get asked this question and a subjective answer is different to the objective answer in somebody else's head, then they're probably going to be surprised. Or even more so, is their subjective opinion versus your subjective opinion might be different, and both sides might be surprised. But yeah, I think some people have a difficult time understanding the difference. And I think it's important to be able to distinguish between the objective answer and a subjective answer, because if you're subjectively thinking that you're a 10, but objectively you're a 2, 2's a bit low. Let's say objectively you're a 5, then it's not delusion per se, but I think there's some disconnect with reality. To add a little extra context though, let's say 100 people in the world did think you were a 10. Why shouldn't one of those people be you? You know, if you were objectively a 5, but you viewed yourself as a 10, shouldn't you be one of those 100 people that think you're a 10? I think it's good for self-confidence. I think it's good for, believing in yourself. And, you should look in the mirror and like who you are. So in that sense, I think if you personally view yourself as a 10, even if objectively you're not, there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's probably good individually. But to know the difference between the objective and subjective, and to be able to not be blinded by your subjective answer, I think is good to know. But yeah, what's it mean to be a 10? Mostly, I think people, when they ask this question, they're asking for the objective answer. Thanks for watching. See you next time.